doing this by Zoom, and so we thank God for technology. She's in another city, and we are grateful that she's going to be. While they bring Elaine up, let me just introduce her to you. And so, Jaren, you could just go ahead and have her ready for us. And so, Elaine is a registered psychotherapist, and she has been in private practice for 17 years. She is no stranger to us here at Mississauga Victory Church. She has ministered here before on this topic of marriage. And so Elaine has worked with couples from premarital counseling to recovery, separation, and everything in between. She has traveled extensively and, offering workshops and different things like that on marriage. And, so she is known for this. She has been married to her husband, Greg, for 36 years. So know that she comes to us with a lot of experience. They have 3 daughters and sons-in-laws and a dog named Max. So today we are going to be talking about how the pandemic has affected and is impacting marriages, and it's placed a whole different level of stress on marriages. And so this is a new normal for all of us in this season. And so today we're going to be talking about how to recalibrate in this season and to help marriages. And so again, if you have not yet invited someone to join us, then I want to encourage you to send out the link. But without further ado, let me say good morning, Elaine. So glad that you are joining us today. Hello. From London, correct?
Yes, I'm sitting here in my office in London. Isn't this wonderful that we can have such technology to help us during pandemics and lockdowns and things that we never expected? It's great to be with you.
Thank you so much. I have said that Zoom was created for such a time as this. And how would we do church and do all of these things without Zoom? And so we're really glad that you can join us for this. Okay.
Yeah,
and so
great
as
to be
we
with you.
Thank you. Now, I have a little bit of a lag in hearing you, so bear with me. I don't mean to cut you off, but we do want to jump right into our topic today. And we're going to be talking about marriage, and this is one of your areas of specialty. And no doubt this pandemic has created a whole deal of another level of stress for marriages. What are some of the stressors that you're seeing impacting marriages today?
Yeah, it's just such an interesting time, isn't it? And I think for the most part, it kind of caught us off guard a little. No one predicted a pandemic. I don't know too many people that would have known that this is what 2020 was going to look like. I know for me, going into 2020, I did feel that the kingdom of God was going to be accelerated, but I just really had no clue of how that was going to look. And certainly there was a lot of play on the word, the numbers 2020, that it was going to be double, but I don't know if we ever thought it was going to be double trouble. So here we are in this time, and certainly it is, it's emotionally challenging. It's very exhausting for people. There's a lot of stress in the home, and whether the home is made up of 2 people, just married, or even an individual, or whether the home is a pile of people all living together. And we certainly have had to come together more with our families through lockdowns and all the things that we're experiencing. It really has been a time of new stress, and some of the stresses, Marcia, I'm sure you're seeing this too, but some of the stresses that I'm hearing and I'm recognizing in people is, the challenges to work from home. Initially, back in March and April, that was incredible to get offices set up, to get Zoom meetings going, to get all sorts of technology working and finding space in the home for quiet, because the kids are really underfoot as well. So at that time, there was kids around, schools were closed. There was so much going on in that way that it created a tremendous amount of stress. And I think that people have overcome some of the initial obstacles with working from home, but the exhaustion has increased in my mind. So there's that, there's working from home that has created stress. There's lack of connection with people. So some of our normal ways that we connected with people in the past, so it could be, just neighbors, getting together with friends, even going to church. As you're saying, there's very few people sitting in this congregation with you. So some of the nice chatter that would happen in the foyer and prayer for one another and things like that, we're really missing that sense of connection and meaningful connection. So that's created a lot of stress for people in trying to find ways to feel purposeful and connected with others. I've also noticed incredible lack of motivation with college students. So this seems to be an area that I'm seeing a lot in the home, is so many students, well, even high school students, working part-time from home, part-time in the classroom, and for college students, most of it is at home. So that's creating a lot of stress on families. It's creating a lot of stress on marriage, to have to work, motivate your kids, and there is quite a lot of depression that I'm noticing and having to work with college students. So these are just, some of the losses and changes, and a lot of people have too much time alone, then other people have too much time together. So it's such a difficult, different, and challenging time, and all of that puts an incredible amount of stress, I find, on our marriages. Mental health is another one too, is that with all this stress and pressure, financial pressure, uncertainty about the future, it creates a lot of pressure on the brain, which affects our mental stability.
And I anticipate that with some individuals being laid off, there is additional financial stress for families, and then that puts stress on the marriage, obviously.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. And so as these stressors increase in the family, how is it impacting, the individual husband and wife? And how can we begin to assess, if our spouse is really stressed out? What are some indications and some cues?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we always have to look at things from well, I do anyway. I look at things from 4 perspectives, because I think we're very holistic in nature. And so we can see what's happening physiologically. We can take a look at what's happening psychologically, spiritually, and also relationally. I think those are the 4 main components of our makeup. So some symptoms that we could watch for in one another, in our family members or our partners or spouses, are things like from the physiological side, just exhaustion, loss of appetite, maybe sleeplessness, maybe, things like digestion issues, maybe increased appetites. There's a lot of things that we can see physiologically that could be going on in someone that are indicators of too much stress. Psychologically, definitely there's forgetfulness, loss of motivation, some fears, difficulty in concentrating, constant racing thoughts, or going through all the what if scenarios and the fearful scenarios of what could happen. These would be indicators for sure the psychological stress. And then with relationships, we notice a lot of irritability, increased arguments, misunderstandings, agitation, just maybe a lack of empathy, a lack of grace towards one another, because as we are physically and individually becoming tired, our capacity to absorb some of the external pressures and someone else's stress becomes less and less for us to be able to absorb and be able to handle and manage. And then of course there's the spiritual component that we can recognize is people will say things like, I don't know where God is. I don't hear from God. I worry, like, is God real? Just asking a lot of questions spiritually. So those can be indicators that we see of the people around us that they're really not managing the stress that well, and we can begin to maybe take some stands or even just increase in our own awareness and be able to encourage them. There also are, it's interesting, Marcia, because some people actually really thrive under stress. So they can find some, really be able to dig in and find that internal strength that causes them to adjust, to adapt, maybe call on God, draw closer to God. Sometimes stress and pressure can actually bring out some good things in people as well. So I don't want to paint it all in a negative light, but these are things that we can be seeing and noticing with people, just the 4 areas of that stress affects.
Elaine, I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit more. Sorry, I should be using my mic. Expand a bit more on what individuals, before we talk about the marriage relationship, what are some signs within ourselves, and I know you've touched on it, that's saying to us, hey, you're stressed. What are some of the red flags where we should be paying attention to our own mental health? What are some of these cues?
Yeah. I know for me at the beginning of the pandemic, I actually would categorize myself as being a bit traumatized. So everything that was familiar was shaken and disturbed, disrupted. There was such an incredible disruption. And I found myself I was tearful. I was extremely agitated. I was sleepless. I found myself super anxious about things, that it was just like this incredible loss, or almost like the carpet had just been, the floor had fallen. I fell into this, major abyss, or we could say that the carpet's been ripped out from underneath me. And I felt very lost.
Wow.
So those are things, we can really listen to the verbal cues. We can listen to the body language of our partners. There can be just words that they're expressing to someone else. They may not even be saying it to us. We can be listening to their conversation and dialogue with other people that can really give us an indication of the level of stress that people are experiencing. And I always really encourage people to look beyond the obvious. So they could be saying something, and yet their behaviors are telling something completely different. So we want to be able to see past, I'm good, I'm fine, don't worry about me, leave me alone, all that kind of stuff. Those are actually even signs that someone isn't coping well when they're pushing you away. So that could be a few things. I don't know, did that answer your question okay?
That was so good and so full. You know what I would really like for people to hear is that here is a woman of God, mature believer, spirit-filled, a counselor, and you've expressed what you went through. And I find that sometimes believers, we don't want to admit and we don't want to say out loud that we're stressed or, you know, we're feeling upended, because we're supposed to put on this nice, everything is going okay with me because I'm a strong Christian. But it is refreshing to hear that you went through some of those stressors. And I think people need to hear and say, you know
Totally.
what, this is real. And there's nothing wrong with you if you're feeling upended and feeling out of sorts. And as you said, being able to recognize it in your spouse and not think that they're less Christian or they're less than or they're weak or whatever, because this is normal, I think, anyways.
It totally is normal. We've never experienced this before. So how are we supposed to be, you know, perfect in executing something we've never experienced? And the last thing we need from one another is judgment on our, you know, our spiritual,
Right.
our level of spirituality when we're going through something like this. This is, I'll tell you another little personal something. This has been a revival for me. This season has been a time of revival because I've had to notice my weak areas. They have been heightened, and punctuation marks added, exclamation points added to every weak area. And so I've really had to look and increase in my own self-awareness and be appreciative of the people around me as well, that we are all learning something new and growing and adapting in a new season. And it can be a time of increasing connection with God, connection with each other, a time to grow like never before. Distractions are gone. We don't have hockey to run our kids to. We don't have all the extracurriculars. We're locked down with each other. And so I think that this is a season where we actually can become better, without being so cliche, without being bitter.
Right. And I liked what you said about different people will respond to this stressor differently. So where one spouse may pull away and the other spouse may want more attention, right? And want to, perhaps, ask a bit more from that spouse. Meanwhile, somebody else will retreat to the basement or even be physically present, but retreat on the inside.
Yes, so true, so true. We're each so individual, and that's part of marriage is learning to be selfless and sacrificial and working to meet the need of our partner, which is really hard when we're under stress ourselves, to be able to find that capacity to offer something more to our partner in those seasons.
Awesome. Let me just interject. I didn't say this at the beginning. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. So I want to encourage you to put your questions for Elaine in the chat field on YouTube, or you could, for those in our church, you can send me a text message and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. But let's talk a bit about the marriage relationship. We all see that this is indeed a stressful time. Elaine, what are some of strategies that you would recommend to help couples recalibrate in this season? How can they cope and thrive during this crisis? I've been doing a sermon series on how to thrive during a crisis and not just survive. So how can we move our couples to that place to recalibrate in their marriage?
Yeah, what a great sermon series, Marcia. I think it's such a necessary time to speak to the issues, right? So I thought about three things. So I knew you were going to ask this question. So I was thinking about three things. Of course, marriage is so broad, like it's just, and very personal. So what one couple might be experiencing may not apply to someone else. And the topics are endless that you can talk about on marriage. But I was thinking about three things that probably would hit a lot of concerns in probably most marriages. And so one is increasing in your communication. I want to unpack that a little bit more. Finding meaningful connections. So there's three words that we're going to pull out here: communication, connection, and commitment. And if I can just, unpack these three words a little bit. Communication, I think, has to be constantly evolving in our marriages. We always want to get better at really understanding and hearing the heart of the person. But especially in this season, I think that we have to develop improved listening skills, improved empathy skills, and of course, de-escalation skills. So one little formula that I work with a lot of couples on is called an EAR method of communication. Actually, that's what I call it, an EAR method of communication. So it's very simple. It's just EAR.
Okay.
And a lot of times we are very good at the A part, or the central part of communication, and that is to assert ourselves. So we are going to say what we think, we're going to give our opinions, we're going to maybe give them very boldly, and so that is important to good communication, is that assertiveness and being able to express yourself. And sometimes actually the opposite occurs too, where couples might find, or someone within the couple might find, that they don't have opportunity to assert themselves, share their opinions there, because they shrink back a bit to avoid fights or escalation, that sort of thing. So that actually is very poor communication. We want to have the ability to assert ourselves, which in the EAR, EAR, that is central. That's the A part, and it's very central to good communication. But along with that assertiveness, we have to bookend it with an E and with an R. And so the E stands for empathy. And I think that empathic relationships that can actually learn and hear what's going on the other side of someone's words, can be the most meaningful and effective relationships. So empathy is putting yourself in the other person's shoes. It's just like super simple. When they say to you, I feel stressed, put yourself in their shoes and try to understand what stress they are experiencing, why I could be contributing to their stress, and making some comments along those lines can actually really de-escalate any type of argument that could come up in communication. So empathy is saying a few things when your partner expresses a concern, they're asserting themselves, they're expressing a concern, they're expressing a fear, they could be expressing levels of stress or frustration. And so the empathy piece start is that's the E, which is the beginning of EAR, is to say, wow, I never really thought of it that way, or I can imagine that would have been very hurtful for you. Expressing some level of concern and really putting yourself in their shoes to try and understand what it is that they're saying. And then the R
Really
part
powerful.
of communication is respect. Totally. It's the typical, it really is the customer service call. So if I were to call Rogers and I was super upset about my cell phone bill being $2,000 this month, if someone else just said, well, sucks for you, suck it up, sweetheart. If they were just to say something like that, I would be more infuriated. But if on the other end they're saying, oh my goodness, Mrs. Olson, I can understand. I would be really upset if that happened to me too. Let me see what I can do for you. Like, totally different. Now we get into problem solving versus just trying to be heard, which is what happens in our relationships when we can really hear from the other person, acknowledge their pain, acknowledge their feelings, find truth in what they're saying. That right there allows us to go into problem solving versus just arguing and fighting to be heard. So that's something that really needs to increase all the time. I know I've been married 36 years, and I have to work on empathy continuously, really hearing from my husband's perspective and trying to understand why he's feeling or thinking the way that he is. And then just that R part of communication, the other bookend of our assertiveness is respect. And when we truly, so this is kind of an interesting concept, Marcia, because we can respect a very rude boss, right? We can respect people that we have very little to do with. We can respect people because of their position, even though they might be difficult, mean, rude. We can show a tremendous level of respect to that person. And I just think with our marriages, this person that we're married to is the most important person on the planet next to our relationship with God. So if they're in this position of the highest level of position in our life, just purely on position, not anything else, not anything they said or done or deserve, we can show them a tremendous level of respect because they hold a position. So when we're being respectful to someone like we would even a mean boss or our neighbor who seems super rude, they have a position in our life, and just because of that position, I can still be very respectful to them. And when I'm doing that, I'm actually not swearing at them, I'm not slamming doors, I'm listening, I'm trying to manage my own emotion in that moment and just offer a tremendous level of care with my words, which again leads us to some really lovely problem solving, which we want to do always in this crisis season because we haven't been here before. We want to learn how together to problem solve well. So I think if we're empathetic and we add respect to the words that we want to share, wow, we've got a tremendous level of communication going on here.
Wow.
Do you want me to keep going? I was going to talk about connection.
I just want to comment for just a bit that even for our singles, that ear is not just for marriage. And as you're saying it, I'm excited on the inside. Let me see if I get it right. The E stands for empathy. The A stands for being assertive. And the R for respect. Did I get all three? And that is, I love the simplicity of it. And in my mind, I can see how that would play out to de-escalate and open up conversation even more. But that's so good because a lot of times we are saying to the other person, well, you shouldn't feel that way, right? And rather than empathize or, well, I don't see it that way, or, you know, but that is so good. I love it, love it, love it. I am going to steal that one, if I may, and use that in my communication ear. All right, please continue, Elaine.
Steal
That's
it.
really good.
Go for it. Yeah. So yeah, the second word that I was thinking about is connection. And although our connection has changed and the patterns that we're used to and the availability of ways to connect has changed so much, I think that we still can work to cultivate some meaningful connection. And we have to work at it. We have to be creative because we don't have we just don't have options in many ways. So I definitely would notice on a regular basis that people are starving for meaningful connection. So here's a few things that I would really encourage. One is just reduce your screen time. That actually is a very individual pursuit. You know, when we're just on our screens, on our phones, on our iPads, and, that we're just by ourselves with a screen and maybe a virtual person. So I would say definitely reduce your screen time and replace it with conversations around the table, maybe appointments to get together. So it could even be a Zoom appointment, but we're trying to reduce screen time. So with the people that are around you and definitely your partner, I would say, why don't you set an appointment and take a cup of coffee, sit down at the table and just chat about something that is important to that person. So increasing some of that, walks together outdoors. The outdoors are so important for getting that natural light into our body, increasing our vitamin D. It also stimulates a lot of creativity, creation. We're in creation, which is part of God's creative wonders, which I think it really helps us to get out of our, heaviness of what's going on with work and our homes, and just gives us opportunity to see the bigger world and everything that's going on around us. So lots of walks outdoors together can also just stimulate some lovely, meaningful connection, even if you're just talking about brooks and flowers and this time of year, the snow but yeah, getting together outdoors. I would encourage people to actually read a physical book together. So find a book. It doesn't matter even what you read, fiction, nonfiction, self-help, doesn't matter, but just like sitting down together and reading a little bit together and then having discussion about it can be so nurturing to your soul, which helps to draw these, build these nice bridges to one another. Or do a creative project together is something else that I was thinking about. Our first ministry to human beings is our partner. That's our first ministry to one another. And don't give up, because we're very disconnected and it's hard to find ways to reconnect with each other. We're just so set in our own old patterns and traditions. Don't give up. Ask God. Be creative. Take the time to continually try to connect, even if that person pushes you away and doesn't seem interested. But your teenagers do that. Don't worry about that. It takes time to reconnect. And so just keep trying. I mean, I have this motto: it's fail as fast as you can. So if this doesn't work, move on. Try something new. Pardon me?
Did you say fail as fast as you can?
Absolutely. Fail as fast as you can. So it's like, if this doesn't work, move on and try something else. If that doesn't work, move on, try something else. And the more you try different things, different ways to connect with each other, you'll start hitting on some wonderful times, some meaningful moments, some things that feel, really build that strong bridge to one another. But you may have to try a lot of things and not be successful in order to find some that you will be successful with.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful. Okay, we have communication and connection, and the third one.
Yeah.
For us.
The third one is commitment.
Okay.
So really reestablishing our commitment to the relationship. And this is I think this is a very spiritual thing that we do, because it's sacrificial, and sometimes there's not a lot of appreciation or acknowledgement for it, but it's something that we give selflessly of ourselves to the other person. And I think it's really important in this time is to, between you and God, this isn't something with our partners between each other. This isn't, I'm going to be committed regardless of what this person does. I'm committing because this is a response that I am making to God in this season to increase my commitment, my care, my love for that person. So I was thinking about Philippians 2, 3, and 4 this morning. And this is a scripture that I think it's the best relationship advice out there. And it can apply to any relationships, but certainly does apply in marriage. And basically it says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value the other above yourself. not looking only to your own interests, but look to the interests of the other. So there's three things here that I think really spell out some incredible bonds that can be created when we act in this way. And so the one thing is, do nothing out of selfish ambition. So this is Philippians 2 verses 3-4. Do nothing out of selfish ambition.
That is hard to
I mean, if
do.
we just stop there.
It is one of those verses in the Bible that when I read it, I go, really, God? Do you know how hard that sounds? But if it's in the Bible, it means that we can do it and we must do it. Please continue.
Yeah, we need to try. So, yeah, do nothing out of selfish ambition. So that begs the question, what's my motivation here? Why am I doing this? Am I being selfish? Does this have to be like this, or is this just the way I want it to be?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge challenge right there. And then the second one is, in humility, value the other above yourself. So in this time of tremendous stress and exhaustion, you know, if I were to constantly, this is where I work, right in this room.
Mm-hmm.
And my house is right outside that door. So if I were just to walk outside that door at the end of the day, and believe me, my calendar has been more than full through this season, I'm exhausted by the end of the day. And if I walk out that door and I just say, oh, honey, I'm too tired to, make dinner, and I'm too exhausted to do this, or I'm too exhausted, I just want to, turn on Netflix, I don't want to talk, I don't want, it's like, what if he's tired too? We're going to pull further and further and further apart. So this works really well when both people are doing it, where you're esteeming the other higher than yourself. So if I were to walk up here and my husband says, oh my gosh, I had a terrible day, I'm so exhausted. And I say, you know what? Let me figure out something for dinner. Let me do this. And he'll go, no. I know you're tired too. So let me figure out something for dinner. I said, no. I'll do it. You sit down. And he says, no, I'll do it. You sit down. I mean, what kind of wonderful environment are we creating here where we're preferring the other person above our own needs? And honestly, it's really hard, and it doesn't work if only one person is doing it. They're going to feel very taken advantage of. But if two people challenge themselves before God, remember we're talking about this commitment is, I'm committing because God's giving me strength to do this. And I'm being responsible to him, not to my partner. It doesn't really matter what my partner's doing. I'm doing it for him. Then I will be able to get that strength to continue and to help and to bless and to, be the partner. So do nothing out of selfish ambition, value the other above yourself. And then that third part is, don't look only to your own interests. This is where we really pull apart in our relationships where, well, I'm interested in this, so I'm just going to do this, and the other person's interested in that, so they'll just do that. It's easy to be interested in what you're interested in because you're interested in it, right? That's not even hard, but it shows commitment again and selflessness to be interested in what the other person is interested in. So I know for me, through this pandemic, I'm not really a board games person. My husband is way too competitive. I don't find it fun, but I've learned to be interested in that because he's interested in it, right? And it's again being sacrificial and preferring one another. So profound relationship advice. I'm telling you, if we took that one, those two verses and applied them, oh my gosh, we wouldn't even have to use anything else in the Bible or no self-help books or anything.
That's it.
We seriously would have great relationships with those two verses.
Yes. I love that text. I have talked to God about that text so many times, but you're right. It would shift relationships. And I have to remind myself, if it's in the Word, then God will indeed grace us to walk out that Word in truth. Thank you so much for those three areas, Elaine. We have communication, connection, and commitment. Again, I want to just invite any of our couples, if you have any questions specifically for Elaine, to put them in the chat. But Elaine, would you speak to that couple right now where there is such tension and stress in the marriage that they're probably at an impasse? Each person has gone to their own corner and not quite certain what to do and, you know, how to open up communication and get back to that place, you know, where they were. Could you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, that's a real place for so many people. And I know for us, we were there, I would say, 17 years ago. So maybe I'll just share a little bit of my own personal story. So it was about, maybe 19 years ago. We were at this place where I actually did not like my husband at all. And we were going through all the motions, but we weren't happy. And we were fighting regularly. There was tremendous tension in our marriage. And it came to one day, and I've shared this on national television, so I don't mind sharing it here, but we came to a place where we were having this huge escalated fight. And our daughter got so scared that she actually called the police. And so she was only 6 years old. And we were screaming in the kitchen, and I used to have like fits of rage where I would literally anything in my hand, if my husband said the wrong thing, whatever was in my hand went flying. So like I broke windows, I threw pots through walls, I smashed mirrors with coffee cups. Like, it was just like a free for all. And so our daughter was so scared that she called the police. And the police came, and that was like a hugely sobering moment. Actually, it was the moment she came into the kitchen and she said, I called the police. And she just had like this big pouty look on her face, and she looked up at us, called the police. And we were like, what? You did what? So anyway, it was a turning point for us. It was a turning point. And the police, they came and talked to us, and then they left, and they suggested my husband go and stay in a hotel overnight. And it was me that was more the problem. Literally, I was like out of control with my rage and anger. And so I was in this office actually, and I came in here and I just asked the Lord, I said, Lord, would you please tell me what to tell him, because he's ruining our marriage. Like, just speak to me. And I was crying and I was begging God, please speak to me, help me to know what to do. He's not listening to you. Tell me what I should tell him, and I'll tell him, and I'll fix things when I tell him. So anyway, I opened my Bible and I just flopped it open, and the verse popped open, and it said right on there, it was Psalm 25:28, Proverbs 25:28. It says, if you do not control your own spirit, you're like a city broken down without walls. And I literally didn't quite get it. So I just slammed my Bible and I was like, what? And then I did this whole talk with God again, and I was like, help me, tell me what to tell him. And I'm crying. And I fought my Bible open again, and the same verse popped up. And it was Proverbs 25:28. If you do not control your own spirit, you're like a city broken down without walls. And so that started the process in me of change. And I had to be responsible for myself. So I just want to encourage those couples that feel very polarized right now, feel so full of pain. Start with yourself. Maybe you need to seek out some help. Could be from a trusted friend. It could be from a pastor. It could be from a therapist. Seek out some help and begin the journey inward, because it's worth it. It's worth it. And I know I had to change myself and draw strength from myself and heal my own wounds. And get back into some of the things that I brought into the relationship that really caused it to stop at that moment and explode, really. And I think that's always a starting place, and just take hope and courage, because if it works for one, if the word of God is true and faithful, we know it is, it will perform and perfect and complete those things concerning you. Don't give up, seek out some support, and start with yourself.
Wow. Thank you so much for your authenticity with that, Elaine. That is so real. And I'm sure many couples have been there, and or perhaps going through that place right now. Just one last question. What are some indicators um, to couples to say, you know what, this is the point where you need to get some professional help? I know you just touched on it a bit, but just if you would expand on that a little bit more.
You know what? I never think it's too early. I always think we can improve. So if you're feeling stressed and you've been around this same mountain, you keep seeing the same, your same patterns, it doesn't matter what you try, it feels like you're stuck. Those would be huge indicators to me. And even like I have couples that may have come to me at a time of incredible stress. We work through some things, and they just continue to come. They have a check-in, a couple times a year, 3 or 4 times a year. So even if you feel like you're doing well, it's not bad to read a marriage book. It's not bad to attend a marriage seminar. It's not bad to consult with other people who have good marriages. There's always things that we can learn. But certainly if you feel that you're stuck, you see repeating patterns of poor behavior, you feel out of control yourself, overwhelmed, and just like not connecting with your partner, definitely seek out some support, because in many different ways, there's many options, but definitely seek out some support, because there's no point. You only live once. You only live once. And this probably the person you're married to was a good pick. I mean, no one held a gun to your head when you walked down the aisle. So you did it with all your faculties in place. And so it's probably just been the hurts, the disappointments, the heaping on of inability to handle things correctly that just needs some adjustment. And I think you could probably find the marriage that you really were hoping for out of the person you're with.
And many times I'm sure couples wish that they could trade in that spouse, but it's the person that you're with. This is the person that you made the commitment to God with for life.
I mean, notwithstanding, I really want to put a caveat in there towards any type of abuse. So, and that, I don't want to go down that road too deeply, but no one is, we don't need to feel we need to be stuck in an abusive position, but also get some help in that area.
Awesome. Well, let me just take a quick look and see if there's any. I think we've touched on all of the points that we wanted to talk about today. Amen. And certainly this has been really informative and helpful. I'm just looking at my notes here really quick, and I'm going to ask. Okay, so people are just saying thank you in the chat. I was just reading to see if there's any questions. But do thank you so much, Elaine, for sharing your authenticity, your openness to share. And so again, the 3 areas during this time to calibrate your marriage to the new normal: communication, definitely connection. And, you could be in the house with someone, but not connecting, as Elaine mentioned, and definitely commitment. And the 3 aspects of communication: ear, empathy. A is being assertive, and R is respect. And I think that all of us can apply those. If I could ask, Elaine, if you have a last comment, please go ahead and share, or also just, if you would just pray and bless our couples who are watching right now.
Sure. Yeah, just a last comment. I was thinking about Psalm 46:1, and I'm just going to read it here, that God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in times of trouble. And, we talk a lot in mental health about being present. And so that word just jumps out to me, that God is present. He is mindful, he is engaging, he is available, and he's a helper that can always be there for us in our times of great trouble. So, Father, I just thank you so much for the institution of marriage. I thank you it was your plan that two would be better than one, and that they would have a good outcome for their labors. And Lord, I just ask you to bless couples that are listening. I ask you to bless the couples of this church. Lord, I ask you to open the eyes of their understanding, that they would be enlightened and know this calling that you've placed on their life. They would know what this calling is, and they would walk in confidence and hope and assurance that they can be a blessing and that their marriage can be blessed. I pray wherever the enemy comes in to divide and to discourage and bring hopelessness and just reminders of pain, I pray that you cover them with your peace. I pray that your spirit comes in like a flood and rearranges things and changes things and allows new life to come into every single relationship that's hearing this broadcast. And we just join our faith together. We know that you're a powerful God and you're able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we could ever ask or think. So this is what we're asking. This is what we're thinking, so that you can exceed our expectations in so many ways. We place our trust in you and we thank you. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.